Hello and welcome to our Friday webinar. We have Pamela Clark back with us. Welcome, Pamela. Good to
Hello,
see you.
thank you.
August 1st. Can't believe it's already August. My
Mm.
gosh. That's crazy. And so today's topic this is a really good topic, Beyond the Bowl, creating a diet that nurtures behavior, health, and enrichment. I can't wait to hear about this, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of people that are also waiting to hear about this because the diet, behavior, all this interconnections. So can't wait to see you walk us through it, Pamela. You have
Thank you.
a wonderful, do you have a slideshow for us, a
I do.
presentation?
Yes.
Excellent.
Great.
Excellent. So just a reminder, we'll do questions at the end. If you have a question, use the Q&A button, not the chat feature. But I would like you to use the chat feature to tell us where you're coming from today. So where you're joining us from. Love to hear where you're logging in from. And yeah. And also the weather. Nice. The weather here is great. I don't know where you are, but California is a gorgeous day here. It's the only place you can get weather reports instantaneously from all over because people.
Right, there you go.
Oh, we got Oslo. Excellent. All
Yeah,
right.
Caribbean.
Rainy and heavy rain. This is crazy. I can't relate to the rain right now at the moment because it's not raining here at all. It's sunny. And the Caribbean. Wow. Okay. This is fun. I love this. Everyone wants to be informed here. All right. So, Pamela, I'll let you take it away because I know
Okay,
you've
very
got a
good.
lot of territory.
Oh, let's see if I can remember how to do this. Okay, let's share my screen. Here we go. All right, and from the beginning. All right. So, as Laura has said, we're going to be talking about diet today and how it affects not just the bird's health, but their behavior and the amount of enrichment that they're able to enjoy each day as well. So, why does diet matter beyond just the nutrition that it affords our birds? It's very important because in the wild, our birds forage, and for each species, it's a rather specialized activity. As you can see here, African greys often forage, Congo greys often forage on the ground, whereas other species of birds would never do that. Um, in the wild, food is a puzzle requiring both intelligence and work. I have seen yellow-tailed black cockatoos working hard to get grubs out of logs, and that is just one experience or one example of that. It also requires exertion of effort over a period of time. Birds don't just go and forage for 5 minutes. This is also a social experience that takes up a good part of the morning for them. And it also requires moving around. This is one of my concerns that we tend to just offer food in a bowl. And moreover, many people, because they don't like the mess, they offer food in a bowl in the cage. So the bird doesn't even have a chance to really move around as it eats. When I look at my three African greys forage, I frequently see that they don't stay in just one place in front of the bowl. I feed them out on top of their cages in the morning, and I frequently observe, maybe Ruby will be eating out of her chop dish, and then she walks over and gets a pellet and then comes back and eats the pellet. So I think it's important that we take this into account when we're feeding our own birds. And yes, I realize some of you may be shrinking inside thinking about the mess that this might incur, but it is important to provide for that. And it also requires the presence of flock mates. You'll often see that a single bird in the home will wait to eat until the owner comes home at the end of the day. This is an example of that. They're really hardwired to engage in this experience with their flock mates. So food is not just fuel. What we feed, how we feed it, and when we feed it all become a part of a parrot's environment in captivity. So truly, diet is a part of the behavioral ecology. It shapes how a parrot interacts with its world. So it is absolutely an environmental influence as well. It truly impacts quality of life in captivity. Why and how? Well, because the research that I've done has indicated over the years that there are two primary things that impact quality of life for parrots. One is the ability to make choices, and the other is an ability to perform natural behaviors. So, if we just feed a bowl of pellets, we can see how that could impact quality of life um, in a negative sense. But if we provide lots of variety in the diet, that's going to give them the ability to make more choices. And there are ways also that we can provide diet in a way that triggers natural behavior. I'll give you an example. I have a new Facebook page called The Herbal Parrot, and somebody just published a post yesterday. They had gathered some. Oh, they are. Geez, what's the plant? He called it fat hen, but he had brought in a bunch of the seed pods for the bird to forage for. That is completely allowable as long as we're using some kind of app and we know for sure that we can identify a food that will be beneficial to our birds and doesn't have any sort of toxic side effects to it or qualities to it. So reinforcement and the mealtime experience must also be considered together. I often think of the diet, the need to forage, and the need to train a parrot as three sides of a triangle that all comprise a bird's diet. So we've got to consider them together. Food affects a parrot's mood, arousal level, and motivation for training. It contributes to either enrichment or boredom, and it can trigger or reduce problem behaviors. So, as an example, a diet high in fat or carbohydrates can make a parrot more excitable or hormonal. I see this all the time. Most of my clients have birds with behavior problems that revolve around the production of reproductive hormones. And so, because fats and carbohydrates will increase the production of reproductive hormones, I often see that just changing the diet will help these birds to calm down. There is no doubt that fats and carbohydrates are a trigger for increased hormone production. And beyond that, perhaps they don't trigger that in a particular parrot, but they certainly are capable of just creating more excitable behavior. Also, a diet with increased fats or carbohydrates are going to make a parrot less interested in training. That might not have been an issue when we were all keeping parrots with clipped wings. But these days, I would say 98% of my clients have birds who are flighted, and therefore training is 100% necessary. You have to teach these birds um, appropriate behavior like staying on a perch, targeting, making sure that they are compliant, always stepping up when you ask them to, and always going back into the cage when they do. And so, in order to achieve compliant behavior with flighted parrots, you have to be able to use food reinforcers. And your ability to do that is going to be greatly reduced unless the diet is a low fat, low carb diet. And also, the way you present food can create a rich, stimulating environment or kind of a dull, predictable one. I have started going outside and gathering non-toxic foods like I have alfalfa and I have red clover and things in the garden that I'm growing. And these days I often bring them in and make like a bouquet or something for my birds. I I'm trying all the time to make sure that what they eat and have available to them is something that contributes to quality of life in all ways. So now I want to switch gears and take a brief look at the history of formulation in the United States. So early research in terms of producing pellets, Lafeber was one of the first producing pellets in the 1970s. Rowdy Bush came along in the early 1980s, and Harrison's pellets appeared on the market in the 1990s. I am not going to talk about any other pellets because these three are the only that were well researched. Dr. Lafeber and Dr. Harrison, two of the best vets that have ever been, formulated the Lafeber pellets and the Harrison's pellets. Tom Rowdybush, who formulated the Rowdybush pellets, I actually knew Tom back in the early 1990s. He was a member of my bird club. And I remember him talking about all of the research that he had done on his cockatiel flock to produce the Rowdybush pellets. So these, in my opinion, are the soundest products on the market. However, in the early 1990s, this is just when I was getting ready to start breeding parrots, most people were still feeding at least some seeds. Lafeber and Rowdybush pellets were gaining acceptance. A breeder I knew way back then, she was feeding Rowdybush to her breeding birds. So they had certainly infiltrated the market. Harrison's was just gaining ground. And at that time, because veterinarians in the early 1990s, they used to call seed mix a death diet for parrots because seed has so many problems to it. It is very high in fat. It is devoid of vitamin A. It has a poor calcium phosphorus ratio. And the birds who were coming into the clinic who had been eating 100% pelleted diet, they all had upper respiratory infections. Their nares were misshapen. They had no papilla in their choanal cleft. Their feathering looked terrible. And this was all a result of eating a seed diet. So veterinarians reacted by saying, okay, we want all your birds to eat 100% pelleted diet. However, that was a tough pill to swallow. People had trouble converting birds from seed to a pelleted diet, although that need not be difficult. Come see me if you're struggling. And so ever since then, the debate has continued regarding whether to feed pellets or not. And so now, sadly, pellets, I think, are not gaining ground anymore. Perhaps they have maintained their popularity, but I hear rumblings that I don't like that say fresh is best. So I can give you a kind of very upsetting example. It was upsetting to me. I have been participating in a focus group on, so the goal of the focus group is to produce like not a test exactly, but something that you as a parent caregiver could take. So it has lots and lots of questions, and you get to rate yourself on how you are providing for your parrot by answering these questions. And at the end of it, you get some feedback about how well you're doing. And when we discuss diet in those focus group discussions, there are some very loud voices saying that just this, fresh is best, which makes the top of my head blow off, quite frankly, because unless you have a background in nutrition, how are you possibly going to create a nutritional diet for your bird going with that advice? Fresh is best. What are you going to do? Feed all vegetables? What does fresh even mean? Frankly, it's idiotic. I'm sorry, but most caregivers lack fact-based guidance in feeding their parrots. They're really, and these days, there is no oversight in the development of food. You know, you look at some of the foods that I've listed here, there's no veterinarian behind those foods. There is not. So let's switch back and look at what the current status of formulated diets is these days. Now, I realize that everybody, all of you who are buying pellets, you all think that there's some veterinarian there in-house formulating these pellets and continuing to improve them. I hate to dispossess you of that notion, but it is not true. So this gentleman here, Kirk Clasing, he was the guy who assisted most of these companies with their formulations, and he did it for years. So rather than having some vet in-house, he was the one who was consulting with different companies about how to formulate their pellets. Sadly, Kirk Clasing is no longer with us. He has a personal crisis with his family right now. So at the moment, there is no one who is helping to manufacture pellets. No one with his knowledge, anyway, who is helping to formulate pellets. And veterinarians simply are not educated or able to help in this area. Dr. Amy Zhao, my associate, who started as one of my mentees, she has spoken with him. This is firsthand, maybe secondhand from Amy's mouth information, but she has spoken to him. She has also spoken to a woman by the name of Erin Derenfeld, who studied with him, but Ellen is not interested in formulating diets. And so this leaves us with some problems. The first problem is that currently the manufacturers of bird foods do not provide figures for metabolizable energy on the package. I don't understand why. It's inconceivable to me that they don't, and they need to be taken to task for this. Dog and cat food manufacturers all provide this on their labels. It is in the form of kilocalories per kilogram. Also, often the percentage of calcium is missing from pelleted products. And what we feed our parrots now has basically become a social media popularity contest. And many people still believe that they should feed the parrot what it likes. The problem with that particular philosophy is that what parrots like are fats and carbohydrates, which support breeding. And since parrots are not neutered, their primary goal in life is to produce babies. So what they're going to like is corn, peas, sweet potatoes, rice, pasta, and the like. So we have some more recent considerations for formulation now because the foods that a parrot consumes do impact hormone production. Fats and carbohydrates in the diet are used for energy. Protein is not. So, people have been, veterinarians have been saying for years that protein impacts hormone production. I will argue with that. It does not. Protein is used by the body for the production of tissues, feathers, organs, things like that. It is fats and carbohydrates that are primarily used for energy, and protein will only be used for energy if these are not available. As I said, this is measured in metabolizable energy, kilocalories per kilogram. We have a second issue also. We have had a problem for decades with little budgies here dying from gout or mineralization in the kidneys. It also has affected some cockatiels. And for years, it was said that it was the protein in the pellets. This was after budgie owners started feeding them pellets. This is why some veterinarians still say that budgies and small birds need some seed in the diet. What they're trying to do with that recommendation is to bring down the protein level in the diet. However, it is not the protein in the diet that causes this. Kurt Clasing and I believe one other have done studies that prove that it is excess calcium that causes this mineralization in the kidneys. Therefore, we have to know what percentage of calcium is in these products that we are feeding. And that also is not appearing on the label. Rowdy Bush is the only pellet that has a calcium content low enough for budgies. So budgies should only eat Rowdy Bush. Lafeber has 0.8%, and I believe that's also what Harrison's has, although Harrison's might be 1%. I apologize for my lack of um, being exact on this. Higgins in Tune, I think, has 1.1% calcium. If you feed that pellet to a budgie, it's going to die. So now let's take a look at metabolizable energy. So this is the amount of energy that's left for the body after the losses that occur when it goes to the bathroom. As I've said, fats and carbohydrates produce energy, and then excess energy gets fueled into hormone production and energy-fueled behavior. This photo was not a setup. That bird was actually enjoying the remains of a pizza dinner there. So, because of the behavioral power of food, we have to balance the nutritional experience, and each and every one of you has to become as smart and informed about diet as you possibly can. And you will not achieve that by going on social media. So, please do not get your ideas about diet from any group on Facebook or any Instagram post. The diet for birds must be low fat and low carb. And so, because they also need foraging, we've got to try to provide the lowest calorie options. And then what we do is we save all the high fat, high carb stuff for training. Again, using the smallest size reinforcers that a parrot will work for. Do you need to feed a pellet? Many people are asking this. 100% you need to feed a pellet. You know, with the way that things are in our world right now, you need a diet you can pour out of a bag, okay? A diet that your bird will eat, a diet that guarantees the best nutrition. You've got to provide a complement, a full complement of vitamins and minerals for your parrot's needs. And then we also need, well, there's another reason for that also. Fresh diets may lack enough protein. Vegetables don't have a lot of protein. Grains can, but they also bring carbohydrates to the dance. So if you are not a degree nutritionist, you need to feed a pellet. And pellets should be offered free choice at all times. Parrots should not be meal fed. They are foragers, and therefore you should not wait to feed pellets until the evening. You should have a dedicated dish in the cage and maybe even one outside the cage. I've got a dish of pellets in each one of my birds' cages, but then I also have one outside, and they often will go over and access that, whereas they won't the one in the cage. So let's look at some comparative figures for the metabolizable energy of pellets. Dr. Zhao was able to get these for us. So Harrison's adult lifetime is 3,300 kilocalories per kilogram. Harrison's high potency is 3610. Rowdy Bush maintenance 2,700, and Lafeber is 3,325. So again, Rowdy Bush maintenance is it is the lowest pellet when it comes to metabolizable energy. What's the highest? Oh, that would be tops at 3,800 kilocalories per kilogram. If you want your bird to be hormonal and lay eggs, you should feed it tops. Whoops. All right. So to create a diet for your parrot, you want to choose a pellet that suits your species, and I can help you dial that in a bit. This is the newest information. Frankly, Dr. Zhao and I think, are the only people doing diet research right now on parrots, trying to figure out how we as parrot caregivers can make sense of all of the stuff that is out there for us to feed our birds. So I recommend rowdy bush only for budgies and cockatiels, maybe even for lovebirds and green cheek conures. Although green cheek conures do really well also on Harrison's adult lifetime. Lafeber or Harrison's high potency for grays, large macaws, young parrots, and debilitated parrots. And then remember that pellets can always be changed to lower hormone production. I do it all the time. For instance, if a bird comes to me on tops or Zupreme, that's the other one. Sugar is the fifth ingredient in Zupreme, and I often find that parrots get addicted to it. They are very reluctant to come off of that pellet. Is it the sugar content? I'm not sure. But I will, when somebody comes to me eating one of those high fat pellets, I will help them convert to something that is more appropriate and often lower in energy as well. So, a diet should include a good quality pellet. It should be offered all of the time. Oh, so this protein plus formulation, that's just to kind of jog my memory. Why do we feed pellets? We need to make sure our birds are getting enough protein. That's why, and a good quality protein. And then formulation pertains to the fact that vitamins and minerals have been added to it. This is important. Tops pellets also do not have any added vitamins or minerals. They are deficient in two nutrients. And if you feed tops as 100% of your dietary provision to your bird with no other foods, your bird stands the chance of becoming deficient in those nutrients. And then so again, pellets should be offered all the time. Then we also want to include vegetables and limited fruit. Why? Because, well, lots of different reasons, frankly, but if you do this, it lowers the overall metabolizable energy of the diet. It also, of course, increases quality of life and gives bird more choices and, more variety and omega-3 fatty acids and all of that. But we also want to keep our eye on that metabolizable energy figure and always think about how we can bring that down. And then a diet also should include sufficient fiber. This is something that hasn't been talked about previously to a sufficient extent, in my opinion, because I know a few things and just pieces of information that have come from extraneous sources, like Donald Brightsmith. He is a researcher who has done a lot of work down in Tambopata with the large macaws. And when I talked to him, he talked about hiring the local guys to shinny up the trees, grab these macaw babies out of the nest, and then use a turkey baster to suck out the contents of the crop so they can see what the adult macaws are feeding the babies. And to everyone's surprise, a good part of what they feed is bark. Bark is high in sodium. It's also high in other nutrients. Furthermore, when I was living on Chris Shank's place there at Cockatoo Downs, her wild-caught pair, when they were allowed to free fly out of the aviary at a point when their chicks were old enough for that, what did they do? They flew over to the oak tree, ate bark, and brought it back and fed it to their babies. A third bit of information, I once listened to a presentation by Dr. Donald Brightsmith, who was the director, no, not Dr. Donald Brightsmith. I'm sorry. What? Who? Jamie Gilardi. He was the director of the World Parrot Trust at that point in time. And he was giving a presentation on a study that they had done about the diet of large macaws in the wild. And their diet was 29% fiber. Lastly, I have found a product, many people who are in my circle know about this. It's called Nature's Salad. You can get it, or used to be able to get it at Walmart. And it's made for budgies and small mammals. It is a wonderful mix of things like lemon balm, peppermint, rose petals, uh, edible leaves and stems, things like that, and edible flowers. When I provide that to my birds as a foraging experience with some other things mixed in, I often observe my birds eating some of the dried flowers and things like that. I have also seen my birds eating peanut shells. Shh, don't tell anyone I feed my birds human grade peanuts, and almond shells as well. So whereas I'm not saying feed your birds almond shells and encourage them to eat nature's salad, I'm just saying we've got to keep our eye on this ball as well. And I'm not sure that I really have any current answers for that, other than providing our birds a lot of variety like this and then letting them do with it what they will. Parrots should have 2 foraging periods a day. This is really important. Why? Because they forage twice a day in the wild. And this is something about which I'm very concerned, because our focus when we talk amongst ourselves about parrots, and we talk about foraging, we're focusing on toys. How can we provide foraging opportunities through toys? And then these are provided to the bird in the cage, usually in the mid part of the day when the owner leaves and goes to work. The only problem with this is that in the mid part of the day, parrots don't forage. That's when they have a downtime. That's when they snooze, preen. Their 2 periods of activity during the day are spent foraging. And so we want to make sure that we give them a chop mix first thing in the morning, a well-made chop mix that they can forage through. And then I feed the Lafeber Classic Nutriberries and Ava cakes at the end of the day. To me, it's a perfect solution for that second foraging meal. And I've been doing that for decades, long before I ever started doing webinars for the Lafeber company. So this has nothing to do with the fact that I'm presenting for them today. So then what's left? We need to learn to make a really good low metabolizable energy, but nutrient dense chop mix. Again, we're going to feed this when the bird gets up in the morning. It's going to reduce the overall metabolizable energy of what the parrot consumes. It's going to provide a true foraging experience. It's going to increase the variety in the diet as well as the fiber, because of course, grains and vegetables do contain fiber. But people have had trouble with chop mix historically. So now it's really terrible, okay? Because we used to at least know what chop was, right? So like maybe even 6 years ago, if you talked about chop, everybody was going to have the same image come up in their mind: grains and vegetables, mostly. And it gets frozen. Those are the 2 main qualities of chop that have been there historically. Nowadays, on some like behavior questionnaires, people will say, "Oh, I feed chop that's mostly frozen mixed vegetables." Well, frozen mixed vegetables does not constitute chop. You have to go to work to create chop, but I'm going to make it super easy for you today. The second problem has been that historically, if you make chop, there's too much liquid in it when you go to feed it if you have frozen it. And parrots don't like wet chop. Also, birds don't eat it if you put too many greens in it. I fail to understand why every list of vegetables that every veterinary clinic puts out starts with leafy greens. I got to tell you, birds don't eat leafy greens. They don't really like leafy greens very much. And so if you put a whole bunch of them in your chop mix, your bird's not going to like it. And the other problem with it is thinking that making it fresh daily is best. It's not, and I will argue into the soil on this point if you want to take me on about it. Because you cannot possibly include enough variety in your bird's diet if you make it fresh every day, because you need to feed at least 7 vegetables every day. How are you're going to wind up throwing out just a ton of vegetables if you try and do this. And also over time, your choices are going to be skewed because you're going to be looking at what your parrot eats, and little by little over time, you're going to start feeding what your parrot likes. What does your parrot like? Fats and carbohydrates. So pretty soon you're going to be feeding a chop mix that looks like this. What's this, 30% peas here? No, we don't want to do that. So to make a really excellent chop mix, you do want to include a grain. Grains have been added to chop mix historically because they help to absorb some of the moisture. But grains also increase the metabolizable energy of chop. So Dr. Zhao and I have been working on this, and we have some really good ideas for you. So grains should only be less than 20% of your chop mix, and you should not include beans. Beans are way too starchy, and they're going to bump up the metabolizable energy. When you first start making chop, you should use kamut, even if you have to order it online, because the birds love it. They will carve out every single grain. Even budgies will do that. And kamut is even higher than quinoa is. So it's a good, decent choice for your first grain. You can also use brown rice and quinoa and occasionally some barley, maybe. But you need to keep an eye on the potential energy that you're adding to the mix when you include grains. Now, I used to make chop mix out of fresh vegetables when I lived in California and Oregon. And when I moved to Indiana, where I am now, I realized I wasn't going to be happy if I did that because the quality was terrible and the price was really high. So I have found a way to use frozen vegetables. You can thank me later because this is going to save you so much time and so much money, and it's not going to impact the quality at all. In fact, the quality might just be better. And so I find the best mix or the best variety of fresh vegetables at Walmart. And I can get broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, zucchini, green beans, winter squash, chopped yams, chopped green peppers, chopped kale, and then, of course, corn, peas, edamame pods. So that is a pretty good variety. And then I do use carrots and parsnips, but I get those fresh and I just grate those as my first step. Once I've cooked the grains, I grate those and add those to the grains themselves. And then I start to work on the frozen vegetables because you have to work really quickly. If you allow them to defrost all the way as you're making chop, you're not going to have a good quality chop. So you want to leave all your bags in your freezer when you first start to process this. Maybe you cook your grains the day before and they're in the refrigerator now. So you shred your carrots and your parsnips and you add those. And then you start to take your bags of frozen vegetables out of the freezer. You're going to cut, so the big ones, the things you're going to have to work through your processor, your food processor, are going to be the big stuff, the broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, green beans, zucchini. Leave the winter squash whole because it can get kind of mushy. And so just take the top off of your first bag, pour them into a strainer, because if you pour them directly into your food processor, it's going to scream at you in protest. So first of all, pour them into a strainer, run them under cold water for just 10 seconds, then put them out on a cutting board, chop them into smaller pieces, and then put them through your food processor. Use the pulse function just until the pieces are about the same size as your grains. And then you just process every single bag one at a time. At the end, you're going to throw in your corn and your peas and your edamame beans and your chopped bell peppers and chopped kale, whatever you want to add. And then you mix it all together. Then you're going to add a box of uncooked garbanzo or lentil pasta, which will also help to absorb some of that liquid. And then you're going to add extra firm tofu. So you take your block of tofu, press all the liquid out of it, and then just crumble it into your chop mix it all together, and freeze it in proportions that make sense to you. I feed 2 budgies and 3 African grays, so I feed mine, or I freeze mine rather, in quart-sized baggies. When I was making this for my daughter, she just had 1 African gray. I froze it in snack size portions. So you just figure out what makes the most sense for you. Wait a minute, what did I do here? Whoops. Shoot. Yes, so, okay, previous. Sorry, guys. Okay. I get a little edgy about this point in the presentation.
Oh,
Okay, so once you freeze it, now you're going to feed it. So you take a bag out and defrost it overnight in the refrigerator. If it has excess liquid, you can drain it out. But so Dr. Zhao came up with the tofu idea. And I got to tell you, birds love it. Boy, does it make them eat chop mix even more. And it's a great thing if you have a bird you're converting off of a seed mix diet. This is a way to get some protein into your bird right away before they start to eat pellets. And so then, after you've removed any excess liquid that you have to, you can add some additions. This is how you keep chop mix new and fresh every single time. You can go out and get fresh greens. I've been bringing in purslane and wood sorrel and dandelions and, some of the wilder greens. This summer, you can add flaked oats or oat groats or whole oats, chia, flax, or hemp seeds, goji berries, pomegranate arils, and there's way more other things too. And then just limited fruit on the side. Once you add these things in, you're going to have a greater quantity, in other words, than your bird will eat in that day. So you just go put the rest of this back in the refrigerator, feed it till it's gone, and then you defrost another bag. And then for your afternoon foraging, you can use Nutriberries and Ava cakes. And again, this is not a commercial for the Lafeber company. This is my personal recommendation because I have found these foods so valuable. They're easy to feed. They have low metabolizable energy. They're just slightly above the rowdy bush, and they are formulated so they have vitamins and minerals. So it never fails when I recommend feeding these. I've got people saying, oh, but Nutriberries have corn syrup and Ava cakes have sugar. So in Nutriberries, maltodextrin is the 8th ingredient and corn syrup is the 12th ingredient. And this is not high fructose corn syrup. If it were, it would say so on the label because that is a specific type of corn syrup. This corn syrup is low dextrose corn syrup that is not it doesn't really even have a flavor. It just helps to hold the product together. Ava cakes, the 6th ingredient is sucrose, and then we have cane molasses as the 8th ingredient. Again, these are not concerns for me. When I was studying nutrition, what I learned is that if sugar occurs in the first 5 ingredients, then it is a concern. Same thing if there's more than 3 types of sugar in a product, it can be a concern. These ingredients are not a concern for your bird. So, in summary, diet shapes behavior. The way we feed our birds are going to impact their energy levels, the way they interact with us socially, as well as the behaviors that they express. Nutrition supports wellness. If you feed a balanced diet, you're going to reduce the risk that your bird will become sick because the immune system is supported. I see people all the time online talking about how to protect their birds from getting sick. But rather than trying to protect against every germ, what you want to do is make sure that your nutrition supports wellness. So if your bird does encounter a bacteria or fungal spore, it's not going to get hold in the body. But we also have to realize that for our birds, feeding is enrichment. We have to provide for foraging. It doesn't work to just put a bowl of pellets in the cage. Birds need variety, and they also need this naturalistic feeding experience of foraging that enhances mental stimulation and keeps them from being bored. So mealtime is meaningful. It's a time for parallel activities. It's a time when we can reinforce the consumption of desirable foods. And it can be fun also. You can do things. We've just been talking about food, but what about going around and sharing things like ice cubes with your birds, healthy foods. I will take rice cakes and go around and give my birds some. So you can really, through the offering of food in situations like that, build more trust with your bird. And we've got to look beyond the ingredients, quit arguing online about what food has this and what food has that. What we feed our birds is really critical, but how we feed it and when we feed it also makes a difference. So we've got to make this an area of effort for our birds. And now, if your bird doesn't eat pellets or doesn't eat a chop mix or something like that, I hope that this presentation has encouraged you that you can do this. You can totally make a chop mix. But if you want some help, you can come and see me. I've got the Herbal Parrot Facebook page, the Parrot Fact Lab Facebook page, where we solve behavior problems. I have the Parrot Steward community, which you can join by subscription. And you can reach me at Pamela Clark CVT at gmail.com or visit my website at PamelaClarkOnline.com, where I have a blog with 63 episodes in it, I think, and lots about diet there as well. So thank you so much for listening, everyone.
Okay. Hey, Pamela, can you put that last, I don't know, that last slide up because I was wondering if people could take a screenshot or a picture of that.
Yeah, sure.
But if not, this webinar will be recorded so people
There we
can,
go.
let's see here. Well,
Can you see it? I put it back up.
no, no.
Maybe
But
not because I didn't,
yeah,
maybe I didn't share it.
but it'll be on the webinar recording. But
Okay.
just
All
so
right.
people. Okay, that was excellent. Let's see if
Oh,
we,
thank you.
yeah, um, for questions. We do have questions.
Yeah, good.
Maybe we can go at the end. Okay, so Glenna wants to know, pellets have calcium amounts defined, but how can you tell how much extra calcium a budgie gets from like cuttle bones? My female budgies will chew up cuttle bone in a few days. The males will spend a month chewing up just one. So it sounds like the females go through it quicker than the males. And how can you tell how much extra calcium they're getting from cuttle bones?
Well, I wouldn't feed a cuttle bone if you're feeding pellets. Cuttle bones are provided. They were provided initially because birds were dying eating seed mix because they didn't have enough calcium. And I don't think that cuttle bones are a very good source of calcium. They can also encourage breeding, which I think is exemplified by the fact that your females eat way more than your males do. So if you're trying to breed budgies, I would say go ahead and continue to feed your cuttlebone or ask your veterinarian about it. I personally would not feed any bird a cuttlebone. I would instead feed formulated diets that have enough calcium in those and not excess calcium, because there would be no way of knowing how much calcium a bird is going to get from a cuttlebone. You'd have to analyze it scientifically.
Okay. Okay. So someone asked, they see that Rowdy Bush, they're looking on Amazon. They see the Rowdy Bush with corn and wheat. Does that seem correct? Does Rowdy Bush have corn and wheat?
Well, I think all parrots have corn and or all pellets, You have to make pellets out of something, okay? You can't make them out of air. And I know that corn has a bad reputation, but it actually is an excellent source of protein. It's an excellent source of vitamin A as well. People who bag on corn when they criticize corn in formulations, those people don't know what they're talking about. They just listen to somebody on social media who said corn is bad. Corn is not bad. Wheat is not bad. Together, they're going to work to form more complete protein sources for you, because some foods will have incomplete protein, meaning that they do not have every single amino acid in them. But when you combine corn and wheat and maybe something else, then you do get complete protein. So corn is not a problem in pellets, and neither is wheat.
Okay. Um, is the salt content in frozen veggies a concern? That's a
No.
question.
When I talked to Donald Brightsmith about his research, one of the things that he was looking into for years was the reason why parrots went to the clay licks. For
Mhm.
years, it was published as fact that they went there to eat clay to reduce toxins that had accumulated in their bodies from the foods that they eat. Well, that on surface, on face value, is silly anyway, because why would parrots eat a bunch of toxic foods? It's not like, when you start looking at plants, as I always have, I've got a degree in ornamental horticulture, and now I'm becoming an herbalist, um, oh, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. You realize that very few plants are toxic.
Mm.
And so remind, where was I going with this?
Well, we're talking about salt content in
Oh, yeah,
veggies. You
yeah,
mentioned
yeah.
Donald
Okay. So
Broadsmith
yeah,
and
so
the kale.
Donald Brightsmith, yeah. So anyway, his research proved that they go there for the sodium content. Also, bark has sodium. So this idea that sodium is going to damage our birds is not correct. Moreover, sodium just washes out of the body, any excess amounts of it. So I fail to see how salt in frozen vegetables is going to harm our parrots.
Okay. Question about the chop. How do you cook the bell peppers to avoid them getting mushy? And how do you remove the excess liquid once it's defrosted? And how do you introduce tofu to your budgies? So three questions there.
Okay. I'm tired, so you may have to feed them back to me one at a time.
I
It's
will. I'll feed them back
weird,
to you
I
one at a
gotta
time.
tell you. Okay. So, tofu and budgies. Well, you just put it in the chop and they eat it. You don't introduce
You
it.
dice it like smaller proportion or
Yeah,
it's
you crumble it.
crumble it? Okay.
Yeah, when you make the chop, you crumble it into, as small pieces as you can possibly get, and then it's all mixed up in there, and they just eat it. They love it. Really. You can train budgies with tofu or egg whites. So for these really sensitive budgies that get really hormonal, that's what you can use to train them rather than millet. They love it. Okay, then getting rid of the liquid when you defrost the bag. So for years, what I did was I cut a corner off of the baggie and set it in a measuring cup so that the liquid would drain out of it. And then I would save it in my freezer for when I cooked the grains again to make the next batch of chop. But you'll find that the tofu greatly decreases the amount of liquid in the chop. Maybe I didn't make that clear. Dr. Zhao and I were trying to engineer a chop mix that doesn't have that liquid in it at the end. So the tofu does a really remarkable job of that. And then what I realized is, why don't we all just buy food dehydrators like I have? And in the summertime, when the corn and the green beans and the zucchini and all these other vegetables are at the peak of freshness, why don't we chop them up like we do for our chop mix, dehydrate them, put them in a baggie in the freezer or a dark place, and then when you make chop in the wintertime, you use those instead of the frozen ones. And so I've already done this. There's no liquid in your chop if you do that. None at all.
Okay. And then how do you prevent the bell peppers from getting too mushy, from getting mushy?
Oh, well, you certainly wouldn't want to cook them because that's going to make them even mushier. So if you just buy the frozen ones, you just cut the top off the bag. They're already chopped. So you just throw those in. But if you're going to use fresh bell peppers, you use a knife and you chop them very carefully and then you put them in there because they're just full of liquid. So they do
Okay.
contribute quite a bit to the overall liquid content of your final product.
Is that more tofu will soak it up? It sounds like the tofu is like a sponge.
Yeah.
All right. Is that a question about are pellets considered ultra processed? And is that something to be worried about? Or is the combination of ingredients too important? So are pellets considered ultra processed? And is that something we should be worried about?
Each pellet is processed differently, actually. The most processed pellet, also, boy, I'm gonna get myself in trouble here, but I think the two worst pellets on the market are Tops and Supreme. And because Supreme is processed at such a high temperature in excess of 550 degrees, um, and so I would consider Zupreme ultra processed. The others are not. Because of course, processing is going to destroy any nutrients that you have in there, or processing destroys nutrients, let's say that. And so the more highly processed a product is, the less nutritional value it's going to have, or the manufacturer is going to, use some tricks like maybe spraying vitamins and minerals on the outside of the product.
Mm, okay. And let's see. We have time for do we have another one?
I saw that Denise Woolsey raised her hand.
Oh, let's see if Denise can tell us what the
Oh,
hand raise.
so, and Brenda has a comment here. She says Lafeber pellets are a truly pelleted diet. I should have said that.
Oh, okay. Good point. Thank you,
Yeah,
Brenda.
yeah.
Well,
And
let's
there's some variation of that for Harrison's and Rowdy Bush as well. They are not highly processed, those three.
okay. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm looking to see if we had. I thought we had no mention of seeds in your diet. Right? Okay. There's no mention of seeds in your diet recommendation. Do you recommend a zero seed diet? And what about sprouted seeds?
Good question.
Yeah.
Okay, so sprouted seeds, in most sprout mixes, you don't see sunflower or safflower seeds. So most sprout mixes are grains and then things like mung beans, maybe some sesame seeds, things like that thrown in. So they are not typically high fat, but sprouts can contribute quite a bit to the overall metabolizable energy of the diet. So I just would feed them as a supplement, I would, for instance, sprouts are one of the things that I will mix in after I've defrosted the chop, but I don't feed them every single time. I don't think that sprouts are like magic. They're not going to like make your bird instantly healthy just because you feed sprouts, and that's what people seem to think. Also, the length of time that you let your seed sprout is going to dictate the nutritional content that it has. If you let your sprouts go for 6 days, they're going to have lower metabolizable energy than if you feed them just when that one little tail comes out. Now, seeds, I assume you're talking about sunflower and safflower seeds, those kind of seeds. I don't recommend those be included in the diet. However, remember I said that I think of nutrition as like being a triangle, kind of, at least we have three considerations when it comes to nutrition with parrots. We have the regular diet that we feed them to keep them healthy, but then we also want to provide them with other foraging toys and things, for just enrichment. And then we also have to train the birds. So I save all seeds, all high fat nuts for training and guidance. So the birds still get them, but they just have to earn them. So, for instance, I do a lot of stationing with my birds because I want them to stay on their perches and not come onto my furniture. So, whenever they are where they're supposed to be, I'm going around handing out little nut pieces and sunflower seeds and things like that. So they still get them in the diet, but they're controlled. And I use them to make sure that I have compliant parrots. Foraging winds up being tricky, doesn't it? Because we don't want to tip the diet. We don't want to all of a sudden rush in with a bunch of nuts and seeds for foraging, because that is going to increase the metabolizable energy too much. So I try and use things like, what are those things called? Kitech oven fresh bites. The birds really like those, but they're still kind of a pellet. They've got kind of high metabolizable energy, but at least they're a formulated food. You can use a different kind of nutriberries or ava cakes. For instance, I've discovered that my African greys love parakeet nutriberries, which are super low in energy. So I can give those to them for foraging, and then give them the regular ones for their evening meal. You can use oat groats sometimes, things like that for foraging. So I just try and not unbalance the diet with that side of things. I
All
realize
right.
we're over time now, so stop talking.
Oh, no, thank you for that. Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, so I just want to say that the information that you gave with your the pages that you host, that's at the end of your slideshow, and you can go back and watch it. This webinar is recorded, so we can if you wanted to log into those sites and check out what Pamela's talking about, you can either watch the whole webinar again and relearn because there's so much to absorb, or go and find it at the end. It'll be in the recording. So there we go. Pamela, once again, yeah, everyone just loves your honest take on things. It's very helpful, very enlightening, and great information. Yeah, just like someone said, great information. That's about yeah,
Thank
it's about
you.
as solid
Thank
as
you
a
very much.
summary as you can get. Thank you all for joining. So sorry. So next Friday, not weekend, next Friday, heading into the weekend is
Oh yeah.
going to be our special episode, 200th webinar. Oh my Lord. So yeah, um, we're gonna have, like, as you can imagine, we want to celebrate this. So we're gonna have special guests. Dr. Lim's going to help co-host that, and we're gonna have giveaways. And Pamela, you've been on, how many webinars have you? Gosh,
I don't
I
know how
the
many.
number is, yeah, but
I'm gonna
but
dress up. I'm coming.
yeah, you better join. You're
I'm
coming too.
dressing up. I am.
Yep. So we have special guests. We have a lot going on next Friday with our 200th webinar episode. As you know, Pamela will be with us. We'll have special people pop in. So you got to join us, and we're gonna have special giveaways. And we have, oh, okay, Brenda's gonna remind me of this. We have a special announcement, so a product announcement unveiling next Friday too. All the more reason to join us. So there we go. Uh, all right, guys. Pamela, once again, just love it. Thank you. It's
Thank you.
always a pleasure to have you on. And I'm going to wish everyone a wonderful weekend. All the best to you and your flock. And see you guys next Friday. See you, Pamela, next Friday, too.
All
Bye,
righty.
guys.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks. Bye.